Welcome to the Parent Guide to GCSE Podcast. This is episode number 8. Welcome to the Parent Guide to GCSE Podcast, and today we have Esher Drummond, founder of Teen Tips. Good morning.
Good morning. It's very nice to be with you.
It's very nice to have you here.
And now, we just talked about Teen Tips. That's a very, very quick introduction. Can you just tell everyone a little bit more about who you are and what you do, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a UK BACP accredited therapist, and I qualified back in 2009, and the school where my kids were, they said, "Oh, well, Esher, you do that listening thing." I was like, "Yep, that's 5 years training, but that's fine. Can you come teach kids?" So I literally started off teaching communication and listening skills to teenagers in schools, and but then I was always working as a therapist. And so the therapy, when you're working with teenagers in therapy, actually the frustration is that you're always sending them back into the same environments. And I just thought, if we could just tweak the environments just a tiny bit, because everybody's doing the best that they can on the whole, but if we could make a few tweaks, then perhaps we could prevent quite so many of them needing therapy in the first place. And so I did a lot of training in parenting and the whole kind of family systems, and started running courses for parents, which the schools were booking, and they'd asked me to come in to talk to the staff. And it's gradually grown so that we've now been running, 11 years, now working over 124 schools, I think it is.
Wow.
We're taking a lot of stuff online, so we can come to that later. But we do pretty much all that we do is about helping schools and parents create emotionally healthy environments for teenagers and young people. And because adolescence really can start anywhere from 8 now, I think that's a surprise for everybody. It's for the younger ones as well.
Awesome. I mean, we found ourselves saying quite a bit recently that it's frustrating because parenting doesn't come with a manual, and you're dealing with all of these dramas. I mean, we have 2 17-year-olds, so we've done the teenage thing with boys. We've not done the teenage thing with girls yet, but our 11-year-old is starting to head that way, and it's terrifying. I mean, we're both ex-teachers, so we've spent most of our working lives dealing with stroppy teenagers and less stroppy teenagers and everything in between, and yet when you're faced with it with your own child, it feels very different. So any support and advice you've got for all of us on parenting, we happily take on board, because it's...
Well, okay, so I'm going to challenge you, because I think the first thing we have to do is we have to view them with a positive light, and kind of thinking of them as going to be stroppy, difficult teenagers. Funnily enough, becomes often a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I guess the first thing is thinking of this as, I think it's the best part of parenting, having done it a few times. But I also recognise, and you're right, they don't come with a manual. And if they did come with a manual, that's usually run out by the time they're about 5. And there seems to be quite a big gap in terms of, and it's so different. You have to change your parenting style. Otherwise you end up just really disconnected from them. And that's when it doesn't work at all on any level.
Yeah. Well, we're very lucky. She's very, very kind of chilled out and lovely, and has a very sunny disposition, but we're starting to see those first few kind of pushing the boundaries, reacting irrationally and things, and I know, because I've kind of done a little bit of research around it, I know it's, her brain is doing all sorts of crazy things and developing at different stages, and so she's not so in control of what's going on, and the hormones are all kicking in, and she's trying to deal with all of this craziness at once. And I just need to keep reminding myself that when this mini drama bursts out, I will be getting my wonderful daughter back shortly, I hope.
Absolutely. No, of course you. I think this is it, isn't it? It's about keeping the communication going, and for us to be able to stay as the adults, because it's much more difficult for them to control the emotional outbursts than it should be for us. So if we can stay calm, not take too many things too personally, it's just, often it's that kind of, what arrow can I chuck at the moment because I'm angry and I'm upset and I don't really know how to deal with this. So looking after ourselves, I think, is quite important. They use that analogy of the flying, putting your own life vest on first, and I think that's absolutely right. We need to have our own support systems in place, just so that we can actually be there for them. Because it's a difficult transition, isn't it, adolescence?
It is. It's a whole new world. You're kind of, some people are still thinking of you as a child. Some people are starting to say, yes, but you should be acting more like an adult now. And it's got to be really, really difficult. I mean, I can vaguely remember back that far, and it was not much fun at the time, and I don't want to go back, frankly.
No, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I always say, the best days of your life. But actually, I wonder genuinely, if we were all given a choice or given the option to time travel, how many of us actually would go back and do that particular kind of probably 5 years all over again. I sure as hell wouldn't.
Nope.
But that's probably why I do what I do now, because it was such a nightmare.
So you have a course about helping parents to understand the teenage brain, I believe. What is it that parents, can you give us the kind of very quick blurb about what parents should know that helps them to understand why teenagers are teenagers?
I think the bit that's particularly relevant for you and what you're doing is the part of the brain which is, they're kind of wired for excitement, novelty, and a bit of experimentation. And frankly, revision provides not one single one of those things. So for them to be able to, because it's not novel, it's not exciting, frankly, most of the time, and there's always something, and they don't have that impulse control either. So it's much harder for them to resist, for example, the allure of social media or gaming, to settle down and do revision. So it's just understanding that is the way they are wired. They're not trying to be difficult. It's just really, really hard for them to have that level of self-control, and also that they're not really wired to be able to see the outcome either, especially long term. So I mean, I've worked with one last year, so funny, who's like, he came and he was having trouble getting motivated to do revision, and I was like, well, so how long have you got until the actual exams start? And he said, oh God, it's such a nightmare, they're forever. It's like 8 days. And so, and you and I sitting there thinking, 8 days, what are you talking about? You mean you haven't started? But for him, that still felt like eternity. So I was like, okay, well, let's break this down. How many hours of that are you going to be asleep? How many hours of that are you going to be eating? Or blah, 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 blah. And when he could start to see it literally in terms of small pockets of time, and actually realistically how much time he actually had, suddenly he could get that sense of, oh, okay, right, now I've got that enough of a sense of urgency to sit down. But by the same time, we don't want to send them spinning in the opposite direction, into full-blown panic. I haven't got enough time. It's that fine balancing act, I think, with teenagers.
Yeah, I think if they look at the bigger picture, they don't understand where to start. And we've talked a lot about just trying to do small but effective pockets of revision, rather than this, I must do 8 days of revision. That to a teen, they just can't do that. They can't get the concept. No. They've got to do half an hour here, an hour there, and that seems to work far better.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I always, I'm probably like you. I say you're far better off doing 3 full-on slots of 20 minutes than sitting down thinking I'm going to do an hour and a half. You spend half an hour faffing around, then you get going, but then your brain switches off because actually it's got a bit bored by now, and you only end up doing it an hour and a half an hour, whereas you could have done an hour of really quality stuff. And so it just sits better with how they're wired to work, I think.
Yeah, we've talked about that on previous podcasts. So we talk about presenteeism. They're at the desk, they're there for the hour and a half, but not a lot's happening. Whereas if you did a focused 20 minutes and then had a break, it's just it's so much.
And I think we all operate a little bit like that, don't we? But I think teenagers are particularly, because of the way their brains are wired, they are particularly vulnerable to distraction, shall we say.
And we're both amazing at procrastinating. And I think actually we learnt it off our daughter, who is the queen. And I don't apologise for saying that. She is just amazing at it. Something that I'm sure by the time she's 16, we'll have hopefully got a little bit of a lid on. But
yeah, I think also you've got to understand people's resistance, because resistance is that it's that wall between thinking about something and doing something, and it'll be different for everybody. So, and this always sounds a bit weird, I think, when I talk to parents about it. But actually, some of them will be as frightened of succeeding as they are of failing. If your whole sense of being okay, because the focus is on being academic, for example, and if carrying on being academic means that you're going to end up always living somebody else's version of your lives, then self-sabotage can creep in, and actually that's delaying tactic, procrastination, is one of the ways that we self-sabotage, isn't it? Having said that, for others, and I know I'm one of them, just having a little bit of a sense of urgency is what gets me to sit down sometimes and just get on with it. So again, it's a balancing act, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's about getting to know yourself and your how you work best, isn't it? And whether you need that deadline, or whether you're quite good at kind of getting it over with and looking at it that way. If I get this done now, then I've got lots of time to not worry about it. Whereas there are some people who just work best under pressure and like to leave it to the last minute, and that works for them. It's challenging as a parent to see that happening with your team, because you're thinking, oh my goodness, their exams are in 8 days, and they're thinking, yeah, but I'll get it all done, it'll be fine.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
Oh goodness me. Yes.
And we've got a few of our teens that we help to mentor, and one of them particularly, the penny has just dropped, and the change from 10 days ago to today is huge, because they've realised that actually there is a lot of work to do, and it is, there is a bigger picture out there. They know what they want to do after school, and they need to work to get there. So,
and I think that's also, is it, engaging with that idea of where you want to end up. Yeah, because it's harder to motivate yourself to do something if you don't have an end goal in mind of some description.
Yeah, we couldn't agree more. We've set up for our members a goal setting masterclass to help kids actually engage with what life could look like in 10 years time, because so few of them think about it. They don't have any clue about things like, what will they have to pay in rent out of, in terms of a proportion of their income, what will go on rent and on bills and on taxes. And it's just getting some kind of concept of how that could look for them, and what skills they could be using. Because when most of us were growing up and going through the school system, talking to parents here, we were still very much in the era where you'd have one career. Like you'd start in a business and you'd work your way up, and that would be it. Whereas nowadays it's really, I think the average is about 10 different jobs. And by that I mean as in slightly differing fields for people, because people move around a little bit more. There's lots more online training, there's more opportunities to change and do something a little bit different. And so for kids to think about what skills they've got, what they actually love doing, can really help them to get a bit of a better idea of what life could look like, because they tend to go with what they see. If you've got kids growing up in a family of teachers like ours are, heaven forfend they end up working in schools because they haven't seen anything else. We want to make sure that they've got those options, that they've seen the big wide world and all the things that it could offer. And that's something that I think a lot of parents struggle to do.
And schools just don't provide for it anymore. I mean, when we started our careers about 15 years ago, there was a part of the curriculum called life skills. It was an actual lesson, and everyone had to do it. And it was throughout the whole school from years 7 through to 13. And that's gone, because the government has said you must do 8 lessons, and it's got to be, maths, English, science, and however many others. And all the kind of life skills essentially are taught in tutorial time, which generally for most schools is either completely wasted or spent doing revision for exams or catch up for coursework, and it's just been lost.
And you must see a lot of this, because when kids find, if you've got a really massively creative child who is fantastic at all sorts of creative things, and then they go to school and they're not so great at the academics, and they spend all day basically feeling rubbish about themselves, that's got to be something that leads them quite directly to you in terms of therapy, because it must be an awful feeling to.
Well, I think we've got a bit kind of, the whole education at the moment, I think, has got a bit off track, shall we say, in that I don't think it's really preparing them for the job markets of the future, where, as you say, flexibility is going to be hugely important. And in order to be flexible, you have to have a certain number of basic skills in place. So creativity is one of them. You can't be flexible if you can't be creative. Social skills, I think, are going to become more and more and more important, particularly as the machines take over the sort of stuff that can be automated. That idea of initiative and the critical thinking, so and what are we still teaching them for? We're still teaching them how to pass exams, how to learn stuff which frankly you can Google in 2.2 seconds, even if you're as slow at typing as somebody like my mother. Sorry, Mum. And I think it's those transferable skills, but I think parents and schools are often playing catch up with this, and I get parents who are really anxious about the academics, and you kind of say, well, really going, the academics help open doors at the moment, but that's really all they do, is they just all open a door to the next stage, and if you don't open one door, there is always another door, and maybe your child shouldn't be kind of trying to be squeezed through the high-flying academics door, when actually their passion is more about the creativity, which I know is frightening if you as a parent you're a kind of high-flying lawyer or a teacher or a doctor or somebody who's had a profession. The idea of your children going off-piste and having a portfolio career might be really challenging for you. I remember one of mine went off to university and then rang up and said, Mum, I'm doing the wrong course in the wrong university at the wrong time. I don't think I should be here. And I was like, oh. So I said, well, what do you want to do? And she said, well, I'm going to give it a month, because you don't actually have to pay at university if you only spend a month. That's quite a good tip for parents. Do the month, try it all out. If at the end of the month I still don't want to do this, then and I said, well, as long as you come back with a plan B, that's absolutely fine. So plan B was that she went to train as an outdoor instructor, and of course my husband was going, oh my God, she's never going to earn a living, this is a disaster. I was like, just shush, be quiet, let her get on with it. And we did a couple of years of teaching. She was teaching quite a lot of special needs kids how to climb and sail and all kinds of amazing things, and then she said, now I'm ready to go to university, and she's doing psychology, coaching. But she said, well, do you think that matters? I said, no, you've got to think of transferable skills. So you've been able to motivate people, you've been able to do risk assessments, you've led sessions, so you've had to do the critical thinking about what people's needs might be. There's so much more that I think is going to become, all of those soft skills going to become more and more important as we go forward. So I think it's us as parents actually being able to take a step back and go, give them the lead. You know what, I can't live your future for you. All I would ask is that you put in enough effort now that you don't have any regrets further down the line. And if that's the way you approach all of this, you'll be fine. Put in the work now so you don't have the regrets later.
Yeah.
Love it.
Focusing on the journey, just focus on the journey, because if you get the journey right, the results generally kind of take care of themselves. And even if you get the whole journey right, there's the chance you walk in on the day, you feel sick, you've got a pounding migraine, the paper just isn't the one that you wanted. So many things, but at least you did all you could to get yourself there.
I mean, that probably answers my next question, because I was going to ask about what's your top tip for navigating exam stress for teens. But probably the answer is maybe as long as they feel that they've done the best they could, and really they shouldn't feel stressed because they've done their end of the deal, as it were.
Well, I think partly that, but I always actually say to them, you know what, a certain amount of stress is not a bad thing going into an exam. You know, you've got 3 different types of stress. You've got performance stress, you've got health anxiety, and you've got relationship stress. Those are the 3 things that generally cause us most worry. And, you know, of the 3, the only one that can be beneficial really is the performance anxiety, because there's a lot of research to show that when we're moderately stressed going into a high pressure situation, we actually perform better. So our brain literally grows to overcome the challenge. So when I'm working with them in the schools, I do a whole talk for year 11 on managing exam stress. And I show them a ruler and I'll say, okay, so down at 0 to 1, totally chilled, not remotely stressed about it, and gradually going up, you know, until you get to a 10, at which point the chance of you actually getting into the door of the exam room are fairly minimal because it's too stressful. Where would you put yourself? And there's always a few, bit of a generalization, but often the boys, there's always a few that will say, oh yeah, no, completely 0 to 2. And then it kind of goes up from there. And the majority are sitting around a 5. And I say that's really where you want to be. So those of you who are 0 to 2, you want to go and hang out with the guys who are sitting up at 8, 9, because it's really catching that stress. And you could do being a bit more pumped up and ready for action because the adrenaline's going, you're thinking faster. And those of you who are up at an 8 or 9, you want to hang out with the really chilled ones. Because being up at an 8 or 9 is not helpful because you're very close to going into fight, flight or freeze, at which point you can't focus, you know, even to the point that your pupils dilate and you can't read the small print properly. So, you know, it's getting them to understand that stress per se is not bad, provided you understand how to manage it. And there's a really great thing called anxiety reappraisal, which is just helping them to think about when you start to feel anxious about something that you're going into, so an exam, instead of telling yourself you feel anxious, tell yourself you feel excited. And if you keep repeating that message, the brain flicks, because there's no difference in the physical responses between excitement and anxiety. So your body will feel the same inside. But if you tell yourself you're anxious, then you risk going into fight or flight. If you tell yourself you're excited, you won't go into fight or flight. And there's quite a lot of research about it. But I think just giving them a few little tools like that can be really helpful, so that they feel like they've got a certain level of control. And then a few quick fire things to help them calm down if it really is all becoming a bit too much.
Yeah, that is an absolute top tip, because I know, I mean, over our years, we've seen children basically talk themselves out of being able to walk into an exam room, and that would be a really useful way to look at it, actually, because you're right, it does feel the same, and it's just it's knowing that tip to then be able to reframe slightly. So parents, don't take anything else away from this. That is the one to make sure you tell your kids, I think. The
reframing, you know, because what was it, that great quote, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right. So it's that, you know, you might as well, you've done the work, you've got to this point, you might as well tell yourself that actually whatever happens, I'm going to be okay, and I'm in an hour and a half or 2 hours I'll walk out of here and it'll be done. So, and it's exciting because it's nearly over. You've put in the hard work by now, hopefully. If not, then you have every right. Sorry, I missed that.
So that's probably how teachers feel about observations, where there's a massive run up to it, build up, and a week beforehand you're planning, and then at the end of the day it is only half an hour, or whatever it is, and then it's done, and there really is no need to worry about it. But pretty much every teacher on the planet does.
Yeah, of course it is. It's performance anxiety, because we all, you know, you get used to your audience, don't you? So I don't feel particularly phased standing up talking in front of parents or students now, but I still get, if weirdly, if I know there's a psychologist in the audience, that will take up your stress levels because it's a fellow professional. And I think we all underneath it have a little bit of that imposter syndrome going on. Or for me, if I think there's a headmaster in the room, that generally makes the whole thing a whole lot more stressful. So, I think from the teaching perspective, holding that empathy that actually you do know what this feels like, and the best way to calm people down is using empathy rather than sort of trying to push them or rescue them. Actually, do you know what? I know this is really, really tough. I know this is really tough, and I do believe you can do it.
Yeah, I think that's probably a conversation that's going on around the country a lot at the moment, because we're recording this at the time of schools are kind of very will they won't they in terms of closures because of coronavirus, and so I think there are a lot of very, very anxious teenagers out there, and it's an important conversation to have, that actually it's a perfectly valid response to what's going on. But we can only control what we can control, and that's pretty much ourselves. So allowing yourself to get all stressed out and panicky about everything isn't going to help anyone, least of all you. So reframing and thinking, do you know what's the silver lining here, might be a good way to look at things.
And I think with it's serious what's going on at the moment. There was one of the headmasters was talking about on Twitter about it being like World War III, and I thought we have to be really careful of the language we're using, because I don't think that's helpful. Everybody is stressed enough. Those of us running small businesses, you're wondering, am I going to be able to pay everybody? The teenagers, am I even going to get to sit these exams? What's going to happen? I've got 2 doing finals this year. What's that? How's that going to look? And I keep saying to them, I appreciate that for you on an individual level, this is really, really frightening, because it is, a lot of us are feeling that anxious, what's going to happen. But you're all going to be in the same boat. So a plan has to be a national plan. And in fact, it's going to be a global plan. So try and focus outwards rather than inwards, and, believe in the system, because we're not in totally uncharted territories, but fairly uncharted territories. And we do come up with a plan. We will be okay. And your exams, maybe you will sit them, maybe you won't sit them. But it's in nobody's interest, not to have something that you can move forward to the next step with. So we will be okay.
Yep, absolutely.
So, aside from the coronavirus discussion, what do you think is the biggest issue facing teens at the moment?
Oh my goodness, where do you want me to start? I think the pressure to perform. I think this kind of toxic drive for perfectionism. I think parents and families feeling more disjointed, and because we don't live as we always have lived in the past. We don't live in small communities, and I don't think that's been very helpful. In some ways, I'm hoping that this whole coronavirus nightmare is going to give parents and families time to reconnect, and time to just slow down and take a step backwards and be a little bit more reflective about actually, when push comes to shove, which it feels like at the moment, what really, really matters here, and it's relationships. And I think a lot of the teenagers that I work with are quite often feel lonely. And when you talk to them, I say, I'm thinking, oh gosh, are you talking about being at school? No, they're talking about feeling lonely often at home, because we're all living like, these little satellite lives. So I think that's unhelpful. Social media, I think, has its amazing pluses. I think the thing you have to, there is that compare and despair culture can be corrosive and toxic. I think the kind of, if you look at the whole drugs, pornography, gaming, the addictive nature of so much of what is now incredibly easily available is unhelpful. Is that enough to keep you going?
That's
there are a lot of parents listening and nodding furiously. Yes, that's what I'm worrying about right now.
We're definitely sitting there nodding. So
yeah, definitely. So with I mean, particularly at the moment, but in general, there is as a parent of a teenager, there tends to be more potential for conflict. So more potential for conflict as a family, kind of between parents and teenagers, particularly for those of us currently facing 2 weeks trapped in a house all together with you know, without the usual outlets for, you know, getting out and having a little bit of space. So have you got any tips for helping to prevent or to manage conflict with your teen that parents could take away and perhaps put into play?
Well, we have actually just today put out a tip sheet on the website, so they can go there. If you sign up on the mailing list, there's a whole guide of suggestions for coping with being, you know, as you say, all being cooped up together. I think recognizing that, particularly perhaps for teenagers, being isolated from their friends is really, really difficult. You know, they are wired for social interaction and particularly with the peer group. And maybe this is a moment when actually tech is your best friend, you know, because there's some fantastic stuff out there. You know, go and learn how to play guitar, because you can teach yourself anything on YouTube, can't you? Yeah. So our modelling is important. You know, how are we using the time? Just giving people space where it's needed. So even in the smallest spaces, we can generally carve out somewhere that if it's all getting too much, somebody can take themselves off there and have a bit of time out. And sort of creating opportunities to do things that are going to build communication. So whether that's a board game, I'm looking at the moment, our favourite board game in this house is Rummy Cub, which we play non-stop because it's a great game, isn't it? But cards...
We're on Cluedo at the moment. Cluedo is our current obsession.
We say ours.
We mean
not our
daughters.
obsession, our daughters, yeah.
Rummy Cub's one to get.
You know, and just kind of, I love all the little, you know, they're using the TikTok videos and all of that kind of stuff. You let them get creative. There was a brilliant one this morning with a guy who is normally a triathlete. So you saw him shooting across his lounge on lying on a skateboard pretending to swim, and then he comes jogging back in his lycra, and then the third time round he's there on one of his kids' bikes, so his knees are up around his, and then he's creating the next video was you know, sitting on a sofa, and he'd obviously made a cutout of what the back of the sofa and a cushion looked like, so he was then camouflaging, and you know, and that kind of stuff's fun. Why not make a few crazy videos together, or you know, use the tech to help you. And you can do yoga classes, you can do exercise classes. Yeah, we are all confined to barracks at the moment, but with a little bit of creativity and imagination, it doesn't have to be a disaster. And obviously if as parents you're really stressed, which I know a lot of parents will be at the moment, for financial reasons, job, all kinds of things, you know, just holding the moments, so focusing on the small moments that we can have where actually we're just in the now, because we are adaptable creatures, but the trouble is that we haven't really had to adapt an awful lot for a very, very long time, probably for a generation. You know, it's been a fairly smooth ride, and so believing in our ability to adapt and be resilient, I think is important, and modelling that for our kids as well.
Yeah, definitely. We're leaning towards learning to touch type. I think that's going to be something that will make a big difference to her as she gets older. She'll be able to do her various kind of study things, you know, essays and what have you, a little bit faster. She'll be able to DM her friends faster. So we're doing that. We've currently left her designing one of those chain reaction machines. So goodness only knows what state the house will be in once she's done. But I think it's it's the opportunities to do those little creative things that you
Yeah.
wouldn't normally do. And because you're all kind of cooped up together, and a lot of parents aren't going out to work, it means you've got time to do that stuff. I mean, TikTok will eat up very much of your life if you start getting into it. I'm warning you now, listeners. But it's also so much fun. So yes, I might have to be restrained from starting on that.
I don't know if you've seen the Dyson Foundation. The Dyson Foundation is a great website, and they've got this whole thing about sparking creativity and for young engineers. And one of the projects they had on there, which I just thought was brilliant, was can you make a bridge out of spaghetti that is strong enough to hold a pound bag of sugar?
Oh, nice.
And I'm guessing the kind of run on the pasta shelves means that most of us have got a decent amount of spaghetti in the house at the moment. So, why not? Let's go for it. Do something fun and a bit different and a bit weird, and get and build those soft skills that, as you said earlier, they're not getting so much in school. We've got a chance to do that now.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So if parents are listening to this and thinking, well, this all sounds fantastic, I'd like to hear more about this, where can they find you? How can they get hold of your courses and things? How can
So teentips.co.uk, so teen as in teenager, tips as in TIPS, .co.uk. They can sign up there to get, and then you'll get lots of resources. There's lots of online courses, so you can go one module at a time through the parenting course. We are just about, all things being equal, we are just about to launch a parents club, which I'm really, really excited about. So it'll be an online club, and it's got the whole of the parenting course, which you get over the course of the subscription. It's got a Q&A. It'll have a parents forum, so it's not going to be the Wild West of others, because it's a closed forum, and you can answer Q&A. You can answer any question. We'll come back and answer it within about 48 hours is the aim. It's got a directory of therapists. It's got and we're going to put in a huge amount of content, including podcasts, blogs. So all the time, every week, there'll be something new going in there. So we're really excited about that. That's due to launch at the beginning of June. I think if we can get it going quicker, we will, just because whilst everybody's in these kind of uncertain times, it might be something that's really helpful. So, and if you've got a question, you're more than welcome to fire it in, and because I can always add it to the FAQs in the club. So very happy to answer questions if people have got them.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very, very much for giving up your time. And we'll make sure we put all the links and things in the show notes so that people can come and find you, get themselves on the mailing list, and get those tips for when you're cooped up with your kids over the next few weeks.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
It's a huge pleasure. I really enjoyed it. It's lovely chatting to you both, and good luck to everybody who is doing GCSEs and A-levels, and whatever happens, you will be okay. You are bigger than the collection of certificates you will pick up.
Thank you very much for being up with us. If you'd like to know more about how you can support your child through their GCSEs, then head over to parentguidetogcse.com. See you next time.